Islam. By that I mean this. There are those who would take issue with my claim of the African origin of Islam, because their only familiarity with it is through YouTube. I have to say this. I need to stop that. Stop debating YouTube videos. You know YouTube has a 10-minute limit. If you know that you just watched a YouTube video of me that's extracted from a 3-hour lecture, why would you attempt to debate my YouTube video, talk about what I didn't say? Why didn't I say this? How you know I didn't say it? See, that YouTube scholarship, that's the ghetto scholarship that I'm talking about. I don't backpedal from it. I don't apologize for it. That's that lazy scholarship. Some of my critics, those YouTube scholars, take issue on the assumption that I claim that because the worship of Allah is documented among black people before Prophet Muhammad, then that alone is the basis of my claim that Islam is African. And the argument is that, well, there were pre-Muhammad Christians who worshipped Allah. That doesn't make them Muslim. And that point is correct. But that was never a point that I advanced. That was never an argument that I advanced. Because I made it clear that not only the veneration of Allah, Ta'ala, God Most High, is found documented among black people, but the veneration of Allah through the cultic ritual system of the Kaaba predates Prophet Muhammad. Worshipping Allah through the signature of Islam today is not just the veneration of Allah, but it's venerating Allah through the cultic system of the Kaaba in Mecca, the ritual system. And I documented that that ritual system, that cultic veneration of Allah predated Prophet Muhammad and was first documented among these black descendants of those Arabians or Africans in Arabia. And in some cases, these black Arabians called it Islam before Prophet Muhammad. So I have documented. You want to argue with the book, not the YouTube video. Deconstruct the footnotes. I provide 900 footnotes. Now, in the academy, the standard is to use endnotes. So most books don't use footnotes, they use endnotes, and that's fine. But I use footnotes for a reason. See, some of us are new readers. We're lazy. We're not going to flip to the back to see if there's any documentation. And so because we won't flip to the back to see what documentation is there, we may assume there is no documentation. So I don't want you to journey through my book with that assumption. So I use the old school style with the footnotes, so it knocks you in the head page after page. You have to deal with the documentation. You cannot like what it said, but deconstruct the argument. Deconstruct the documentation. Don't dispute my YouTube videos, please. Now, Brother Chancellor Williams, his fundamental error from my perspective in his assessment of Islam and black folk is a most unfortunate ethnographic assignment. In other words, Brother Chancellor's ethnography was wrong. He was a brilliant historian, a meticulous researcher, but he suffered from what so many of us suffer from in writing about Islam and black folks. The inability to engage Islam from the basis of its primary sources, the Arabic tradition. And see, not being able to engage the history of Islam from the perspective of the primary sources created a blind spot for Brother Chancellor. The blind spot was his assumption that Arabs are white folk. And so when the Muslims invaded Egypt in 641, and then attempted to go into Nubia in 643 and then again in 651, he assumed that these were white Muslims aggressing black Christians. And so he saw that conflict as a race war. But in fact, as I demonstrated, the Muslims, now we'll discuss it later, those black Muslims who those Arabs who invaded Egypt were black. But it was Chancellor William's blind spot was his ethnography. If there was a Muslim and there was Arab, they were white. He did not take due notice, and he did not have access to the data at the time he published the first edition in 1974 of this book. He did not have the data indicating that those Muslims who erupted out of Arabia were the black descendants of those original Arabians or Africans in Arabia. Brother Chancellor writes, blacks are in Arabia for precisely the same reasons blacks are in the United States, South America, and the Caribbean islands, through capture and enslavement. This is a clear indicator of his ethnographic blind spot, please. For Ranoka Rashidi says it better and more accurately. The Arabian Peninsula was, like much of Asia, first populated by black people. Some of the surviving black populations, known as the Bedouins, are major portions of the Mahra population, found still in the extremities of Arabia, please. That's a Mahra Arab, please. No, Mahra Arab. Black Arabs today, descendants of those original blacks that populated the peninsula, operating off of the assumption that Arabia, that black folks are foreign to Arabia. And to the extent that black folks are there for the same reasons we are here in America, through capture and enslavement, highlights the blind spot, the ethnographic blind spot of our brother, which is why he could not concede that those Muslims who engaged black Christians in Egypt and Nubia could be anything other than white, please. But Bertrand Thomas, in his book, The Arabs, tells us the original inhabitants of Arabia were not the familiar Arabs of our time, but a very much darker people. A proto-Negroid belt of mankind stretched across the ancient world from Africa to Malaya. This belt gave rise to the Hamitic peoples of Africa, to the Dravidian peoples of India, to an intermediate dark people inhabiting the Arabian Peninsula. In the course of time, two big migrations of fair-skinned peoples, white folk, came from the north to break through and transform the dark belt of man beyond India, and to drive a wedge between India and Africa. The more viral invaders overcame the dark-skinned peoples, absorbing most of them, driving others southwards. The cultural condition of the newcomers is unknown. It is unlikely that they were more than wild hordes of adventurous hunters. In other words, Bertrand Thomas documents that Arabia was part of, in ancient times, a black belt, a stretch of black mankind from India to Africa.